Hi there, Michael here. In today's video I'm going to check out the 1.5 update of Orbit Pro, a software that allows you to convert Dolby Atmos master files into Eclipse Audio, which is the immersive audio format developed by Google and Samsung as their answer to Atmos. This is actually already the third video about Orbit, and I'm going to leave links to the previous videos below. Definitely check those out. What is really interesting about Orbit is that its developer, South Loop Studios, is pumping out major updates like there is no tomorrow. So even though not much time has passed since I made the last video, I felt that the added features are substantial enough to deserve their own video. Now at this point it is really important to mention that this is not a sponsored video at all. I actually paid for Orbit Pro full price myself. I feel that given how often I make videos about Orbit, it is very important to clarify that. Additionally, I'm filming this video about a month before it goes live, and there's a reasonable chance that by the time you are watching this video, South Loop Studios might have already added a bunch of additional features, so keep that in mind. So without further ado, let's open up Orbit Spatial 1.5 before the current version is already outdated again. So here we have the 1.5 version of Orbit Pro. Now I do need to point out that at the time I'm recording this video, this is still in beta. So some things are not working perfectly yet, but you should get an understanding of how the software has evolved from the 1.0 version to the 1.5 version. So the first thing that we need to do here is we need to start a session, and let's give that session a name. Let's call it maybe test, and let's create that. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is add a Dolby Atmos master file, and I'm going to use one that I've actually used before. It is an AI generated track that I've upmixed to Dolby Atmos, and it's called The Man of My Dreams, and it has a little bit of automation in there. Now the first thing that you're going to see is the interface is a lot cleaner now. It's actually very usable at that point. It's very professional looking. It's very easy to see where everything is. Here we have all the individual tracks, the Dolby Atmos bed, the individual objects. We have our view of where the objects are. We have the activity window here, the loudness measurement window. We can solo and mute individual channels. We have the output meters. And here we have the inspector window, which gives us all the information about the individual channels. And then we also have different views. In the original version, if you remember, everything was a little bit convoluted because everything was on one screen more or less. We now have different views that we can select. We can select the one that looks closest to the original version. We have the one that kind of shows us all the individual tracks. And then we have one which is specifically for video editing. And that's actually a new addition that I think works really, really well. And we're going to check that out in a second. But before we do anything, let's have a brief listen to what we have here. So let's just press play. And let's maybe go back to the view with the individual tracks. So we see once again which objects are active. We see a visualizer here, which is really nice. Now if we click on one of those little icons here, we can actually make these individual objects available to us, and we can now see the automation, which is really nice. So now we have that in a separate window, which is really useful and makes things a little more obvious and kind of easier to work with. Or we can switch back to the overview. So we have a monitoring section, and I'm not going to go over that. If you're interested in how that works, I refer you to my original video, because that really hasn't changed all that much. We can change the individual binaural settings or the downmix settings. We can also add head tracking if we want to, and we have a couple of spatial options that we can set. But once again, this is something that I addressed in my original video. What I'm really interested in today is mainly the video editing section, because that is something that's actually completely new, and that is something that I'm actually astonished that they were able to make that quickly. Given how young this software is, it's actually quite amazing the speed with which this developer is developing, and we will see that we already have a fairly sophisticated video editor at our disposal that allows us to create Dolby Atmos or Eclipse Audio videos very, very easily. Now to demonstrate that, what I first need to do is I need to add a couple of video clips to my project, and I have a couple of clips here, so let me just add those. And if I want to create a video, all I really need to do is I need to take these clips here and I need to drop them here on my timeline. So I can do that here. So this is clip number 1. And then maybe let's do a second clip here. I can put them on different timelines. I can make them overlap. And that was already possible in the original version. However, in the original version, we had very, very few possibilities on doing some editing. Now this has changed quite substantially. I can, for example, change the position of that video and the scale and the rotation, depending on what I want. I can also change the opacity. And one thing that I can do is I can now also automate some of the parameters. So let's add a little bit of automation to the opacity of the second clip. And for that, what I need to do is I need to click here on this little square, and that will add an automation lane. Now, unfortunately, I don't see that right away. What I need to do is I need to right click here and then simply say show keyframes. That will open up this automation lane. And if I click here, I then have this automation lane. And by clicking here, by double clicking actually, I get additional keyframes. So let's just kind of maybe start with 0 opacity and then maybe kind of change the opacity to 100%. And then let's go back and let's play that. That actually works really well. Now, in addition to videos, we now also have the possibility to add text. So I can take one of those text fields, for example. So let me just take a title field here and let's maybe drop them here at the beginning. And in the beginning here, so let's give that a name title. This is my great video, my great video. And let's just kind of go back and let's play that again. And as you can see, I now have a title, and I have also options here to automate certain things. So I can also change the position, the scale, the rotation, the opacity. And that works actually really well. And in addition, we also can add graphics. So if you have images, for example, that you want to add, you can do that as well. Now, at the moment, there are really 2 use cases. The first use case is that you can use that, for example, for VJing. So if I go back here, for example, and I click on this little button here, what that will do is it will open up a separate video window, and I can actually maximize that. And then if I play the audio, so let me just open that again. I now have this video that I can project, for example, on a screen, and I can do some VJing that way. Now, the second use case is that we might want to export that video for upload to YouTube, for example. And in order to do that, we need to go here into the export section, and we need to go here into export as IAMF or Eclipse Audio. And that will open up the export section. Now, if you've seen my original video, you might remember that the export section in the first version of Orbit Pro was very convoluted and difficult to understand. They've actually cleaned it up substantially now, and it's very, very easy to use. And you have a couple of presets that you can use. So by default, it opens up with the Esfera preset. Esfera is a streaming service that South Loop Studios themselves have developed. So if you want to kind of use that, you can do that. But you can also use the YouTube preset. Now, little caveat, even though everything is actually set up in such a way that YouTube should be able to understand that, I was not really able to successfully upload the final video to YouTube. Not quite sure why. It got stuck in a processing loop. So your mileage might vary. There might be a little bit of a bug in there. I'm honestly not entirely sure. But I'm assuming that that's going to be fixed in the relative near future. So by the time you're watching that, it's probably already working. But just so that you're aware, I was not really able to successfully upload that to YouTube. And I was also not really able to successfully watch any of the videos that come out of Orbit Pro because I didn't really have any software that can play that video back. VLC should technically be able to do that. However, I was not able to install the latest version, the nightly build, which would be required for Eclipse Audio playback. I was not able to install that on my MacBook. It gave me a file is corrupt error. Not quite sure why that is. So at the moment, everything is a little bit in flux, but in theory, everything should actually work. So what you have to do is you have to simply go to the YouTube here, to the YouTube profile, and then simply say include video. and that will then export everything as a video with the Eclipse Audio muxed in. So it should actually work. But once again, in my case, it didn't. YouTube refused to acknowledge that this was an Eclipse Audio file. I'm not quite sure why. But nevertheless, I think this is actually really, really nice. And this is going very, very fast. So I'm really looking forward what they are going to do next, because the development speed of Orbit Pro is really, really remarkable. And it's going into a very, very interesting direction. Now, I would be a little bit concerned about the video editing capabilities, in the sense that once you go into the direction of making this a video editor, you actually have to compete with all the professional video editing suites. And that means that there will be a lot of things that people will request that they implement. And I don't think this is really meant to be a full video editing suite. It really is meant to kind of give you basic video editing options. And I hope that they can figure out a way to make sure that they are not going overboard and just selecting the features that are really necessary for this type of application, and don't make that into a full-blown video editing suite. But that's really my only concern. Everything else has developed really, really nicely. So job well done. So what's my final verdict? Well, I think the updates that South Loop Studios made to Orbit Pro are outstanding. The interface in particular is now much cleaner and, quite frankly, much more professional looking. The way the Eclipse Audio export works is also very straightforward compared to the original version, which had a very convoluted export section. Now, when it comes to the video editing capabilities, I'm quite frankly stunned at how fast the developer has been able to add a fairly nice set of editing features. I think if you are using Orbit Pro for VJing, for example, there isn't much missing at this point. The one thing that gives me a little pause is that even though you can export video with Eclipse Audio, I was not really able to test how well everything works. This has less to do with Orbit Pro itself and more with the fact that the development speed of Eclipse Audio itself is more than lackluster. Eclipse Audio is now more than a year old, and we still do not have any easy way to playback audio encoded in Eclipse format. Yes, there is VLC, but that only plays Eclipse files in the experimental 4.0 version, and I could not get that to work on my MacBook at all. And when I uploaded the exported video to YouTube, which should technically support the format, the YouTube uploader got stuck in a processing loop and never completed the upload. Maybe you will have more luck, but I had no success making any use of the resulting video with embedded Eclipse Audio. But that does not take away from the quality of Orbit Pro. I think the fact that South Loop Studios, an extremely small developer, can outperform the development of giants such as Samsung or Google is on one hand astonishing, and on the other hand does not make me very convinced that Eclipse Audio is going anywhere. Honestly, if I were Google or Samsung, I would buy out South Loop Studios and hand them the entire development of the Eclipse Audio system. They clearly do a much better job in making the format usable. Well, that's everything for today. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section below or join our free Discord server. The invite link is in the description. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on all things Dolby Atmos and immersive audio. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.